That first one was quite weak. Let's do it then. You can tell, though. Take a look at that. Take a look at the content that follows that. It's still quite filthy. Yes, it is. Yes. Good enough. Hole 10. Well, go on that bank. He might take on a small duty involving the removal of their gritty tailings. Check to see if any gold emerges. Finding a time capsule or a patch of land that the old-timers missed is every prospector's dream. That desire became a reality for Freddy and Juan in the most horrifying way imaginable. They came to the door of a sealed mine after following a trail of extremely pure gold. Check out those spray bars. Take a look at how clean it is. Yes, jets focus precisely where they should. Yes, that does look nice. A place that was forgotten in history books. There was more to it than a possible $3.6 million payout. It was a moment in time that had a sinister mystery about why it was closed off. They were on the verge of opening the door. The 92% issue. It all began in a Colorado valley that was forgotten. It's the sort of location that appears stunning on a postcard, but is unsettling up close. When Freddy and Juan's pickup thundered down a dirt road that was more of a suggestion than a path, the sun had just begun to rise over the rocky peaks. Through willow-tangled swampy landscape, the morning mist clung to the ground. When you think about it, it's humorous. The ghosts of the past were all over this location. Many people have lost everything as a result of doing this, and I most certainly don't want to be one of them. This year is crucial for its success. The steepness of the mountain up here makes it challenging. The ground had partially engulfed the drooping remnants of an ancient cell box, splintered beams, and rusted buckets. Such locations were typically avoided by seasoned miners who spoke about poor luck and ground that was simply too uncooperative. But Freddy was drawn to that same thing. They wasted no time at all. With his shovel cutting into the gravel, Juan, a man who could read a creek like a book, waded into a small bend. He spun his pan, allowing the water to wash away the lighter rock and sand with mesmerizing, practiced motions. It occurred as the murky water cleared. The flash was little and bright against the black pan. Then one more, and one more. A smattering of tiny, brilliant gold particles clung to the lower border. It wasn't much, but Freddy, who was crouched next to him, noticed something amazing. Holy, oh, the amount of gold in that sucker is astounding. Take a look at this. You can see that the color was exceptionally vibrant, even though it's only on the cart. A bright, deep yellow that exuded purity. This placer gold wasn't your typical one. Perhaps richer than anything they had discovered all season. This was something unique. However, a sense of unease persisted despite the success. The residents' murmurs reverberated in Freddy's head. Tales of bizarre mishaps that have been passed down through the generations. In a curse that had hung over this very ground for over a century, miners just vanished. Out here by yourself, you begin to wonder. But most people just wrote it off as campfire chatter. They had a good idea by noon. They collected soil samples from all throughout. The gravel ridge above, the creek banks, and a dry valley close by. Every bag was meticulously labeled before being put onto the vehicle and driven to the local assay station. The hardest thing is always waiting. Though it's just sparkly dirt until you see the numbers, you could be sitting on a lottery win. The phone call came hours later. The outcomes were astounding. 92% purity on average. Take this. Natural gold nuggets usually have a purity of 83 to 92% on average. On the scale, they were at the very top. That kind of amount doesn't merely draw attention. It's like yelling that you've discovered a golden trove in the close-knit world of gold mining. Competing miners begin observing your every action to get the heavy machinery in there before anyone else could smell out their place. Juan intended to attack right away. Constantly the strategist, Freddy urged for patience. Before he spent thousands of dollars eating through empty space, he wanted to trace the pay streak. They made concessions. To identify the richest zones, they would continue to dig test pits and bring in some of the larger machinery. The change was noticeable as soon as the excavator eventually dug into the ground. There was a thick, unaltered gravel base beneath the damp topsoil, packed tightly and gleaming. Big Red, their mechanical beast, the wash plant, began to sing. Gold was appearing in about all of the cleanups. It was astounding to see the first official weigh in. Gold worth $148,000 in a matter of days. Take a look at that. 2.96. Holy, that isn't possible. News of a huge discovery spreads quickly, and it was going to attract more than simply interested people. The actual problem was only getting started. They were being observed. They were now dealing with a serious issue. Hawthorne's whispers. Neither a confrontation nor a threat was the first indication of problems. Only tracks were present. Freddy first saw that one morning. The entrance road's moist dirt was compacted with deep, new tire imprints. Their trucks didn't fit the pattern at all. Too clean, too wide. Someone who had visited within the last 24 hours left these. Someone who wasn't supposed to be on their property. You see, this kind of valley doesn't attract casual tourists. Most vehicles are devoured by the terrain before they reach a mile. The following day, when Juan noticed an unmarked pickup truck parked on the ridge overlooking their activity, that instinct became icy certainty. For about 30 minutes, it simply sat there. Before rolling away, a silent spectator stood behind tinted glass. They didn't have to scout or guess what was going on. More quickly than they had anticipated, word was getting out about their extensive cleanups. That kind of attention is just as deadly in mining country as a defective support beam. A local landowner soon told Freddy in passing that several men had been inquiring about renting the plots next to theirs. In town, Juan heard a similar tale. It was an old-fashioned tactic. Make their lives tough, enclose them, and clog their claim lines. They had 5 children, lost their jobs, and were living in a camper. There are a lot of dogs, I'm not even sure how many. They're all living in a trailer in the desert, you know. Freddy's answer was deliberate. He made digital and physical backups and double-checked all of their claim documentation. He alerted his legal contacts. However, soon after dawn on one foggy morning, the true border was crossed. Juan saw him while doing his initial tour of the facility. A man nonchalantly stepped directly over one of their survey stakes while swinging a metal detector slowly and deliberately with his head down. It was obvious that he was trespassing. Juan didn't shout. His boots crunched on the icy ground as he simply strode toward the man. The only sound for a tense period was the gentle electronic hum of the detector as the stranger froze. There was no place for debate in Juan's piercing low voice. Without saying anything, the man melted back into the brush and backed away. They were no longer alone. The job was not slowed down by the tension. Indeed, it encouraged them. The steel bucket teeth of the excavator scratched against something considerably harder as it dug deeper, removing layers of old gravel, bedrock. This was the bottom of the gold trap, the valley's ancient floor. Freddy himself dove into the pit. Because of its natural cracks and fissures, the rough and jagged rock was ideal for capturing heavy gold that had been washed down over thousands of years. Then he noticed it, a tiny glint in a shallow crevice. It wasn't only flakes or dust. It was a sturdy component. He pried it loose with care. The nugget weighed just less than 2 ounces and was the size of his thumb. That's almost $4,000 at today's prices. It was the sort of discovery that alters the course of the game. How are we doing? Excellent. Got the gold then? Oh, I'm anxious. Juan calculated that their season's total haul may surpass $3 million if the bedrock continued to produce at this rate. However, the nugget evoked a recollection for Freddy. He had heard a tale from an elderly prospector years ago about a mine known as the Hawthorne that was concealed in this valley. It was said to have collapsed catastrophically and been covered up in the late 19th century. When they closed it, the old man vowed that a mountain of gold was still inside. That old myth had always sounded like a wild yarn, but now that I was standing on bedrock, rich in gold, it felt incredibly real. They were going to follow the story to a locked door in the past. A gold core. Like wildfire, the workforce began to hear of the lost Hawthorne mine. A ghost story over vehicle fumes and weak coffee. A version had been heard by everybody. A group of miners sucked up by the earth, a catastrophic collapse, and a rich seam of gold. According to other stories, the survivors used their own hands to close the opening so that scavengers couldn't access their companions' bodies. Others frightened them away with whispers of toxic gas and unstable rock. Ultimately, nobody really knew, and they could have simply disregarded the narrative because the nearby bedrock was producing so reliably. However, Freddy was aware that the ground was attempting to communicate with them. He had not discovered that 2-ounce nugget at random. A breadcrumb, that is. He started looking for irregularities in silence with his partner Juan. Anything that didn't seem to belong in the natural setting. As a result, it is possible to sample and develop existing workings. The drawback of such is that accessing these historic workings is costly and risky. Therefore, Freddy could definitely assist us. They only needed to glance. They discovered it, a rotted wall of timbers, nearly entirely engulfed in layers of moss and dirt. After a sweep with the metal detector near the western edge of the claims was illuminated not by the high-pitched, sharp ping of a single nugget, but rather by the broad, low hum of a large metal mass buried deep, pushing through a thick, unforgiving tangle of thorny brush that tore at their clothing. Compared to the other corroded artifacts on their claim, it was much older. They brought in the ground-penetrating radar just to be sure. There was no mistaking the outcome on the screen, a spectral green picture with a hole beneath it. A tunnel that ran horizontally before plunging sharply into the ground had partially collapsed, but still present. Freddy took out a battered copy of a mining map from the 1880s that he had purchased from the municipal archives years prior that evening. Calloused and discolored, his finger followed the fading lines until it came to rest on a tiny crosshatch. The site was nearly identical to a shaft with the name Hawthorne on it. The hair on his arm stood up when he saw it there in black and white. It was a true legend. The two men exchanged a solemn look and decided on the choice. It was set to be opened. The structure's actual nature became apparent the following morning as the excavator tore away the top dirt layers. This was more than simply an old wood pile. It was a long-lasting design seal. Bolts of rusted iron the size of a man's fist braced thick oak beams. This barricade was no joke. The door was that of a tomb, and there was a carving on one of the big timbers, hidden beneath 100 years of dirt. The wood had been gouged with rough, irregular lettering. It was a chilling message. Keep the fallen souls below. The crew was astonished and silent. This was not a true gold claim. It was the stuff of horror films. Freddy traced the letters while on his knees. The statement had been there for well over a century, as seen by the deterioration. There was a fresh, sharper exhilaration combined with a tangible anxiety. They removed a drill core from the seal's edge in order to test the ground. The rock cylinder glittered in the sunlight as it emerged. Brilliant, inconceivable flecks of yellow, apparent gold threaded through milky quartz. Suddenly, the eerie warning appeared more like a treasure map than a menace. I really didn't anticipate seeing that much, man. Isn't that surprising? All we can do now is hope as we'll start rolling these up. To break through the barrier, a full day of careful rock drill work was required. The drill bit finally made contact. It wasn't fresh mountain air that hissed out. It was chilly, thick, and stale. Air that hasn't flown in many generations. A final piece collapsed, causing a rock slab to thump into the mud. Through the darkness, a headlamp beam revealed the rough-hewed wall of a tunnel. Time had stopped in the place they were about to enter. Freddy entered first. The first sound to reverberate in that room, in more than a century, was the crunch of his boots. The scent of rotting and wet earth filled the air. There was more to this than a tunnel. It was a capsule of time. Where they were dropped, rusted tools were lying. Then they noticed it. Brilliant white veins of bull quartz ran through the walls, and there were thick, ragged threads of yellow gold inside them, like lightning trapped in stone. Half buried in the silt, a few paces deeper, Juan noticed a little leather pouch. A miner's personal stockpile of nuggets from his last day of work was found inside. Their entire life was cut short, but holding it felt like holding a ghost paycheck. A huge old cave-in, a mountain of rock and dirt, obstructed the tunnel ahead, permanently shutting off the remainder of the mine. Was this the catastrophe, or a last-ditch effort to bury whatever was beyond? What do you believe to be the true cause of that tunnel collapse? Did those old-timers intentionally seal things away, or was it just an accident? Tell us in the comments section. To ensure that you don't miss what comes next, hit the like button and subscribe.